GoPro recording hash 734, recovered from a snowdrift near Reed Inlet, Glacier Bay. Date: late March. Time: 11:47 p.m. The frame shakes, snow crunches underfoot. A male voice, breathless but happy. "Look, Amy, my God, look, do you see it?" The camera jerks upward. The sky is ablaze. Ribbons of green, violet, and ghostly white northern lights dance above the snow-capped mountain peaks, reflecting in the dark, still water of the inlet. Silence, broken only by the wind and the distant crackling of ice. A female voice, quiet, filled with awe. "Jake, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. It's like the sky is alive." "I told you Alaska was magic." Jake laughs. The camera lowers again, revealing the face of a young woman, Amy. About 25, with flushed cheeks and eyes shining with delight. She's wearing a thick hat and a parka. She presses close to the man who is obviously holding the camera. His breathing is audible. "It's a little scary," Amy whispers. "So quiet, like we're the only ones in the world." "We are," Jake replies. He turns the camera to film them together. For a moment, their happy faces appear in the frame against the backdrop of the aurora. And then it begins. Interference. The screen flickers with static, the sound distorts, turning into a low, vibrating hum, like metal scraping on ice, but deeper, more organic. "What the hell?" Jake mutters. He shakes the camera. "Lost signal? Battery? There aren't any towers out here?" The hum intensifies. The northern lights behind them begin to flicker unnaturally, pulsing in time with the hum. The camera jerks again, as if Jake turned towards some sound. "Did you hear that?" His voice is tense. "What?" Amy turns too. Her eyes widen in horror. At that moment, the interference clears for a second. The image becomes crystal clear. At the edge of the frame, by the tree line where the snow-laden spruce trees begin, stands it. A tall, unnaturally elongated creature. Details are hard to make out in the semi-darkness, illuminated only by the aurora. But the silhouette is unmistakable. Thin, long limbs. A head crowned with something like antlers, but not quite. They are branched but asymmetrical, dark, almost black, and appear wet, glistening even in the freezing cold. The creature is motionless, yet there's a sense of latent, rapid movement as if it's vibrating in place. A split second, just a split second of clear image. Then, the screen explodes with static again. The sound descends into chaos, crackling, screeching, the same low hum, but now something else is added. Singing, multi-voiced, strange, drawn out, in an unknown language. It overlays Amy's scream, a short, choked cry. "Amy, run!" Jake yells, the sound of a struggle, a dull thud, crunching snow. The camera falls, lens pointing up. For a few seconds it records only the mad dance of the aurora and the sound of heavy retreating footsteps in the snow, an odd rhythm like a limping beast, or two beings walking out of step. The singing fades, moving towards the inlet. Then silence again. Only the wind rustling in the branches and the quiet crackling of ice. The screen goes dark. The battery died. This recording became the unofficial start of case file hash AK793GLB. Officially, it began for me a week later when I was summoned to the Bureau's Deputy Director's office. On the table lay a folder stamped Top Secret and a short note. "Agent North, Glacier Bay, urgent." I watched the recording 10 times. Each time, an icy chill ran down my spine. It wasn't a bear, not a wolf, not a person in a costume. That split second of clear footage captured something that had no place in criminology textbooks or common sense. Local authorities had found only this: The camera trampled into the snow and a patch of blood. Warm, not yet completely frozen in the hellish cold. And tufts of fur. Gray-brown, coarse, which experts couldn't identify with any known Alaskan animal. Inlet of Spirits, the local Tlingit call Reed Inlet. They say the boundary between worlds thins there, especially during a full moon. Jake and Amy disappeared right around the full moon, just like 3 other tourists over the past 6 months, always during a full moon, always without a trace. My task: find the missing or what's left of them, and figure out what is hunting in the icy wilderness of Glacier Bay. The assignment seemed standard for cold cases on the edge of the map, if not for the recording. And the fur, and the blood, which preliminary analysis showed contained anomalies. I closed the laptop. Alaska, the edge of the world. It seemed spirits really did dwell there, or something worse. The Alaska Airlines jet roared as it touched down on the runway at Juneau International Airport. Outside the window stretched a stark landscape. Dark green, almost black spruce trees covered in snow climbed the slopes of mountains whose peaks were lost in low, leaden clouds. The water of the Gastineau Channel looked like mercury, cold, heavy, still. Mid-April in Alaska isn't the timid awakening of nature found in the lower latitudes. It's still winter's grip, only slightly loosened with long twilights and rare sun. Winter retreats slowly and reluctantly here. My name is Valerie North, FBI Special Agent. 32 years old, 10 years on the job, specializing in complex cases in remote areas, serial disappearances, cults. Apparently that's why I was chosen, or because case file hash AK-793-GLB reeked of the kind of weirdness none of the brass in DC wanted to touch. Inlet of Spirits, a missing couple, a strange video, unidentified fur. It sounded like the setup for a cheap horror movie, not a federal investigation. They were waiting for me inside the terminal. A man in his 40s, tall, fit, with short brown hair and intelligent, slightly weary eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, dressed in functional outdoor gear, fleece, waterproof shell jacket. He introduced himself as Dr. Ethan Gray, a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He'd been assigned to our team as an expert on local fauna. Agent North. He shook my hand firmly. His palm was dry and warm. Pleasure to meet you, though the circumstances are certainly grim. Dr. Gray. Likewise. Grim is putting it mildly. Standing beside him was a woman. Shorter, solidly built, with long dark hair braided tightly and high cheekbones that spoke of native heritage. Her Alaska State Trooper uniform fit perfectly. Her eyes, dark, perceptive, looked directly at me, without a hint of deference or nervousness. Sergeant Lena Kah, State Troopers, she introduced herself. Her voice was low, calm. I'll be your guide and liaison with local authorities and communities. Sergeant? I nodded, shaking her hand too. Her grip was firm, like a man's. I knew from her file she was half Tlingit, raised in Hoona, a village near Glacier Bay. Her knowledge of the terrain and culture could be invaluable, or a hindrance, if local legends proved stronger than facts. We didn't linger in Juneau. A National Park Service boat was waiting to take us to Bartlett Cove, the administrative center and main base for Glacier Bay National Park. It was a long trip, several hours through the icy waters of the Inside Passage. As we loaded our equipment, my service weapon, forensics kit, encrypted laptop, Ethan's scientific instruments, including a portable spectrometer and biosample collection kit, radios, satellite phone, recon drones, I noticed Lena carefully scanning the sky. Something wrong, Sergeant? I asked. She slowly shook her head. Just, the air feels strange today. heavy, and the birds are silent. I listened. Indeed, the usual clamor of gulls was almost absent. Only the boat's engine and the splash of water against the hull. The sky was covered by a dense gray veil, though the forecast had promised partly cloudy conditions. Ethan Gray was unfolding a park map on a small table in the cabin. Glacier Bay is huge, Agent North. Over 3 million acres of wilderness. Glaciers, fjords, forests. Looking for anything or anyone here is like finding a needle in a haystack, especially since most of the park is only accessible by water. The missing couple, Jake and Amy, were at Reed Inlet. I pointed to a spot on the map. That's relatively close to Bartlett Cove. But the previous 3, one vanished near Tar Inlet, another near Marjorie Glacier, the third out by the Beardsley Islands. Those are all different parts of the park. But all the disappearances happened during a full moon, Lena added quietly, approaching the table. And they always found tracks. Strange tracks. The tracks are where we start, I said. I need all the reports, all the photos of tracks found at the previous sites. Ethan, your job is to analyze that fur. We need to understand what kind of animal this is. I've already started. Ethan nodded. Preliminary results from the lab in Anchorage are disconcerting. The keratin structure is unusual. There are markers close to caribou, but at the same time, something else. Something entirely alien. Doesn't match any known mammal. Alien, I repeated. Like a hybrid at the molecular level. Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose. But that's just a hypothesis for now. We need a full DNA analysis, and that's proving difficult. The sample is too small and partially degraded. The boat slowed as it entered the wide bay of Bartlett Cove. Wooden buildings of the ranger station, a small tourist lodge, and a dock were visible on shore. The place looked isolated but not abandoned. However, the sense of unease that had hung in the air back in Juneau only intensified here. It felt as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Snow lay thick between the buildings and on the roofs, though dark patches of thawed ground were visible near the water's edge. "Welcome to Glacier Bay, Agent North," Lena said without a hint of a smile. Land of ice, legends, and missing people. I looked at the dark wall of forest that pressed right up to the water. Somewhere out there in that vast, still wintry wilderness lay the answer, or death. My job was to find the former while avoiding the latter, and something told me it wasn't going to be easy. Not easy at all. The next morning we left Bartlett Cove on 2 snowmobiles. Destination, Reed Inlet, where Jake and Amy disappeared. The weather hadn't improved. The low gray sky pressed down, and a fine snow like pellets, what locals call granular snow, fell steadily, covering everything in a fresh layer. Visibility was no more than 100 yards. Perfect conditions to get lost, or for something to sneak up on you unseen. The cold was palpable, around 14 degrees Fahrenheit, -10 C. Quite normal for April in these latitudes, especially away from the ocean's moderating influence. I rode one snowmobile, Lena and Ethan on the second. We kept in touch via radio, but the channel wasn't clear. A constant low background noise like white static, but with a low-frequency vibration that made my ears ache unpleasantly. "Radio's acting up," Lena's voice came through the headset, distorted by static. Like yesterday on the boat. It always gets like this before the full moon. "Before the full moon?" I asked. "The next one's not for 2 weeks. "Atmospheric interference, maybe," Ethan suggested. "Magnetic storms?" "Maybe," Lena replied vaguely. "But the old-timers say it's the spirits tuning in." I winced. Spirits. I needed facts, not folklore. But ignoring Lena's words would be foolish. She knew these places and their moods. "Let's try launching the drone," I said into the mic. "Get an aerial view." We stopped in a small clearing. Ethan took out the quadcopter, a small but powerful model equipped with a high-resolution camera and thermal imager. He ran the pre-flight checks, established connection with the controller. The GPS signal was weak, fluctuating. "Satellites are spotty," Ethan commented, frowning. "I'll fly it manually. Launching." The drone whirred to life and ascended. The tablet screen showed an image: snow-covered forest, the dark ribbon of a frozen stream, gray sky. Ethan guided the drone forward towards Reed Inlet. For a few minutes, the flight went normally, aside from some static on the image. And then the drone just vanished. The connection dropped instantly. No low battery warning, no loss of GPS signal. Just silence. Damn it! Ethan slammed his fist on the tablet. "What was that? It just disappeared." "Did it crash?" I asked. "Doesn't look like it. The system should have sent final coordinates or a crash signal. It just shut down, as if it were shot down or something jammed the signal completely." Ethan looked bewildered and angry. -1 recon tool. "All right," I tried to hide my irritation. "Let's keep moving. Eyes open." We drove for another hour or so. The forest grew denser, spruce and hemlock, closing in over the narrow trail the snowmobiles barely followed. The silence was oppressive. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just the roar of the engines and that low hum on the radio, which seemed to penetrate right into my skull. Lena, riding ahead, suddenly raised her hand, stopping us. She hopped off her snowmobile and walked to the edge of the trail, peering at something in the snow. Ethan and I followed. "Look," she said quietly. On the fresh, untouched granular snow lay a line of tracks. But these weren't the animal tracks I expected. They were prints of hooves. Large, the size of my hand, with a clear cloven shape, and 3, not 2, distinct toe impressions. 3. I'd never seen anything like it, resembling deer or moose, but larger and wrong. Caribou? Moose? Ethan guessed, crouching down and taking out a ruler and camera. "Too big for caribou?" Lena shook her head. "And the shape? Strange. 3 toes? Maybe a mutation? A sick animal?" Ethan carefully measured the print. "The depth indicates great weight, very great." But the strangest part was yet to come. The line of 3-toed hoof prints stretched for about 20 yards along the trail and then simply stopped, as if the creature that made them had vanished into thin air. And right next to the last hoof print, another set of tracks began. Human, barefoot. "What the—" Ethan breathed, aiming his camera at the new tracks. Bare human footprints in the snow. In 14-degree weather, the prints were clear, deep, belonging to an adult with large feet. They led from where the hoof prints ended, straight into the dense woods, where the trees stood so thick it would be difficult to push through. "It's like they transition one into the other," I whispered, feeling that chill again. "Hooves, and suddenly bare feet, in the exact same spot. That's impossible." Ethan stood up, his face pale. "Someone left hoof prints, then took off some kind of footwear and walked barefoot in the snow? Why? Or it wasn't someone," Lena said slowly, gazing into the dark thicket where the barefoot tracks led. "Or it was the same creature." I looked at her. There was no fear in her dark eyes, more like grim recognition. "Lena, what do you know?" I asked directly. She shifted her gaze from the trail to me. "There are old stories, legends, my grandmother used to tell, about those who change shape. Those who come with the first snow and leave with the last ice. They can wear the skin of a beast or that of a man. Legend, Sergeant. I tried to sound firm, though what we'd seen was unnerving. We need facts. Sometimes legends are facts, Agent North, Lena replied quietly, just told in a different language. We stood in silence, staring at the impossible tracks in the snow. Hooves turning into bare feet. The hum on the radio seemed to intensify, becoming a quiet, barely audible whisper of many voices. Or was it just the wind in the branches? I took out my camera and began methodically photographing the tracks. Each print, the transition, facts. I needed facts. But deep inside, an icy premonition was growing that the facts we found here wouldn't fit into any criminology theory. Returning to Bartlett Cove that evening, we gathered in the small room serving as our temporary HQ. Damp jackets hung near the stove, filling the air with the smell of wet fabric and smoke. It grew dark quickly outside. Days in April aren't nearly as long as in summer. The midnight sun was still far off. Twilight here was long and deep. Ethan processed the track photos on his laptop, enlarging images, comparing sizes, trying to find any clue. I reviewed the reports from previous disappearances. The pattern was frighteningly clear. Full moon, lone tourists or couples, no witnesses, strange tracks at the scene, though not always as distinct as the ones we saw today. And that inexplicable hum, the radio interference mentioned by rangers and the few witnesses who heard something strange in the night. Lena, I turned to the sergeant who was silently sipping hot tea, gazing out the window at the darkening inlet. You mentioned legends. Tell me more. What are these shape-shifting creatures? Lena set her mug down. Her gaze became distant, as if looking into the past. My people, the Tlingit, have lived on this land for thousands of years. We know its spirits, its secrets. One legend is about the Kooshdakhaa. Kooshdakhaa? Ethan repeated, looking up from his laptop. I've read about that. Isn't it an otter shapeshifter? Kooshdakhaa, otter man. Is that the translation? Correct. Lena nodded. They say the Kooshdakhaa is a shape-shifting creature dwelling near water. It can take the form of a human, often someone the lost person knows or loves. It lures wanderers by mimicking a baby's cry or calls for help. And also, it can sing, in the voices of those the water has taken. The Kooshdakha's song steals your will, makes you walk towards it, right into the icy water or its grasp. It doesn't kill immediately. It transforms you into one of its kind, or steals your soul, leaving only an empty shell. An otter shapeshifter, I frowned. But the creature in the video had antlers and hoof prints. That doesn't fit with an otter. Yes, that's strange, Lena agreed. The Kooshdakhaa is usually associated with water with otters. But legends, they change over time. And sometimes different spirits can merge, or people confuse them. She paused. There are other stories too. About forest spirits resembling deer but walking on two legs, but they aren't usually considered as dangerous as the Kooshdakhaa. Singing. I remembered the sound on the GoPro recording. There really was something like multi-voiced singing before everything cut out. The Kooshdakha's song, Lena repeated softly. It confuses, hypnotizes. It all sounded wild. Shapeshifters, spirits, hypnotic singing. I was an FBI agent trained to look for people, motives, evidence. And here, everything pointed towards mythology. But the tracks were real. The blood and fur were real. The missing people were real. There's a small archive here in Bartlett Cove, Lena said, breaking my thoughts. Ranger logs, old maps, some historical documents. Maybe there's something there. About strange incidents in the past, or unusual animals. It was a good idea. If this thing had been operating here for a long time, there might be records. The archive was in an old wooden building that smelled of dust, wood, and cold. The caretaker, an elderly Tlingit man with a face wrinkled like old bark, silently led us to shelves filled with yellowed folders and books. We split up. Lena searched for mentions of Kooshdakhaa or other spirits in local records. Ethan looked through old wildlife reports, searching for descriptions of anomalous animals. I took the journals and diaries from the Russian Alaska era and early American explorers. The hours dragged on. Outside, the wind howled, carrying flurries of snow. Dust motes danced in the dim lamplight. I sifted through brittle pages covered in faded ink, reports on fur trade, charts of straits, notes on skirmishes with natives, and suddenly, a find. The journal of a Russian naturalist named Sokolov, dated 1880. He had traveled through these parts, cataloging local flora and fauna for the Imperial Academy of Sciences. Most of the journal detailed birds, fish, and plants, but on one page, amidst sketches of mosses and lichens, was a short, almost casual entry. October 15th. Heavy fog over Muir Inlet. Heard strange singing from the water, multi-voiced like a choir of the drowned. Tlingit guide muttered something about Kooshdakhaa, but then added this was another. The horned one saw tracks on the shore, huge, hoofed, but not moose. Locals fear this place, especially during the full moon. Say, the horned otter drags people away. Nonsense, of course. Likely just a bear or nervous exhaustion from prolonged wilderness exposure. The horned otter, I called Ethan and Lena over. We huddled around the brittle page. Sokolov clearly didn't believe it, wrote it off as superstition, Ethan said. But he recorded the key elements: singing like drowned voices, a horned appearance, hoof prints, connection to the full moon, and local fear. And this was almost a century and a half ago. I felt the thrill of an investigator closing in. So this isn't something new, it's always been here. The horned otter, Lena repeated thoughtfully. That's not purely Kooshdakhaa. It's something mixed. The otter spirit of water, deception, transformation. The deer or caribou, spirit of the earth, the forest, strength. Sometimes a guide for souls. What if it's not two different beings, but one? A merging of two forces? Merging. The word echoed in my head. Ethan spoke of a hybrid at the molecular level. Lena spoke of merging spirits. The tracks in the snow hooves and human feet, merging into one trail. The mosaic began to form, but the picture was monstrous. Impossible. A creature combining features of an otter and a deer, capable of changing shape, luring victims with song, and existing here since at least the 19th century. We need more information, I said, closing Sokolov's journal. Ethan, what about the blood and fur analysis? Anything new? Ethan rubbed his eyes. I sent a request for a repeat, deeper analysis to Seattle. But it will take time. For now, all we have is anomalous protein and unidentified keratin with cervidae markers. So we wait, I sighed, and prepare for the next full moon. Whatever this thing is, it will hunt again. And this time, we need to be ready. I looked out the dark window. The snow hadn't stopped. It seemed Glacier Bay itself was trying to hide its icy secret under a white shroud. A week passed. Snow fell intermittently, turning the landscape outside our base into a monochrome study in gray and white. The full moon approached and tension mounted. Lena and I patrolled nearby inlets, questioning the few locals and seasonal lodge workers, but found nothing. No one had seen or heard anything. Or they were afraid to talk. The feeling of being watched from the dark forest never left me. Ethan rarely left the makeshift lab he'd set up in one of the ranger station rooms. He awaited results from Seattle while trying to squeeze every bit of information from the samples we had. The tuft of fur and microscopic blood traces from the snow where Jake and Amy vanished. Finally, on the 8th day, an encrypted file arrived from the FBI crime lab in Seattle. Ethan immediately locked himself in with the laptop. Lena and I waited in the next room, shuffling maps and reports, but our thoughts were elsewhere. An hour later, the door opened. Ethan stood in the doorway, pale, his eyes wide. He held a printout covered in diagrams and code lines. "Valerie, Lena, you need to see this." His voice was quiet, but trembled with restrained excitement. Or shock. We gathered around his desk. The laptop screen glowed with complex graphs and text full of scientific jargon. "What is it?" I asked. "The blood and fur analysis. The results? They aren't just strange. They're impossible." Ethan pointed to a diagram. "Look, this is a peptide analysis of protein structures from the blood sample. See these markers?" He circled several peaks on the graph in red. "These are human peptides, albumin, hemoglobin, standard stuff." "The victim's blood? Jake or Amy?" I guessed. "Yes, there's a match on blood type and some genetic markers with the missing person's data, but look here." He pointed to another group of peaks marked in blue. "And this? These are proteins characteristic of the deer family, specifically very close to caribou, Rangifer terrorizes, albumin, myoglobin again." "So, the sample has mixed human and deer blood? Maybe the victim was injured and the attacking animal too?" "No, Valerie, not mixed." Ethan raised his voice, slapping the desk. "That's the terrifying part. It's not a mixture of two different blood types. These are hybrid proteins. Look at the molecular structure." He brought up a 3D model of a protein chain. Human and deer amino acid sequences are literally stitched together. Not digested, not assimilated, but interwoven. Like someone took two different Lego sets and built one new chimeric piece at the molecular level. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was hearing. Stitched together? How is that possible? "I don't know." Ethan threw up his hands. "This doesn't happen in nature. It violates every known law of biochemistry and genetics. This isn't the result of predation, where one organism eats another. It's more like transmutation. Smelting one type of tissue into another, using material from both donors." "Smelting," Lena whispered, "like metal in a forge." "Exactly," Ethan agreed. "And the fur, same story. The keratin has a base structure similar to caribou fur, but with anomalous inclusions and modifications found in no known species. And the strangest part, traces of human melanocytes were found in the fur follicles, not surface contamination. They're integrated into the hair structure." I sank onto a chair. My head was spinning. Hybrid proteins. Human cells in deer fur. Transmutation. It sounded like the ramblings of a mad scientist from a B-movie. But the numbers and graphs on the screen were real. The report from a reputable FBI lab was real. So, the creature that attacks people, it doesn't just kill them, it absorbs them? Processes them into itself? I asked, struggling for words. "Looks that way," Ethan nodded grimly. "The victim's body becomes raw material, building material for this hybrid. It explains why no bodies are found. They're literally dissolved, smelted into the attacker." An icy horror gripped me. This was worse than cannibalism. It was the complete erasure of identity, transforming a person into part of the monster at the most fundamental molecular level. "Kooshdakhaa," Lena said quietly. The legends say it turns people into its own kind. Maybe it's not a metaphor. But what about the deer genes? Ethan stared at the screen again. The horned otter from Sokolov's journal. A hybrid of otter and deer. But how? Maybe it's not genetics in the usual sense, I suggested, trying to think logically despite the absurdity. Maybe there's an external factor, a virus, a parasite, something causing these mutations? I looked for traces of viruses or bacteria. Ethan shook his head. Nothing. No known pathogens. Just these chimeric proteins and anomalous tissue structure. It's like the very matrix of life has been hacked and rewritten under new rules. The matrix of life. I looked at Lena. She was thoughtfully fingering a small amulet around her neck, a piece of carved bone. The land here is ancient, Agent North, she said quietly. And the glaciers hold things people have long forgotten. Maybe the answer isn't in Seattle, but here, in the earth, in the ice, in the water. I stood up and went to the window. The snow had stopped. A sliver of the moon, not yet full but already bright cold, peeked through a break in the clouds. Its light bathed the snow-covered inlet in an eerie glow. "The full moon is coming," I said. "Ethan, keep analyzing. Look for any anomalies, any clues. Lena, tell me everything you know about local beliefs related to the moon ice transformations. Every detail." I felt we were onto something important. Science had encountered the inexplicable, but the facts were stubborn. Hybrid proteins, transmutation, a creature that was both predator and recycler of human flesh. And it was waiting for the full moon, just like us. The night of the full moon. We set up an observation post on a hillside overlooking Reed Inlet, the very inlet of spirits where Jake and Amy vanished. The cold bit deep, despite thermal underwear and winter gear. The temperature had dropped to around 5 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 15 C. The sky, surprisingly, was clear. And the moon, it hung over the snow-capped peaks, huge, white, unnaturally bright. Its light flooded everything with a deathly pale glow, turning the familiar landscape into an alien, otherworldly set. We'd been in position for hours. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the occasional crack of ice on the inlet and our own breath fogging in the air. Ethan had set up several motion sensors and thermal cameras around the perimeter, but so far everything was quiet. Too quiet. I scanned the inlet through night vision binoculars. The icy expanse, sparse dark spruce along the shores, snow-covered cliffs. Nothing suspicious. Lena sat beside me, still as a statue, wrapped in a thick blanket over her uniform. Her gaze wasn't fixed on the inlet, but somewhere distant towards the forest. "It will come from the land, not the water," she said quietly without turning her head. "Why do you think so?" I whispered. "The tracks. The hooves started on land. And I feel it. The forest is watching." I swept the binoculars along the tree line again. Nothing. Just shadows from the trees, long and black on the white snow. And then I noticed something strange. "Ethan, look." I handed him the binoculars. "The shadows." He put them to his eyes. "What about them?" "Look at that lone spruce near the water. How many shadows does it have?" Ethan was silent for a moment, adjusting the focus. "One, long, sharp, from the moon. Now look at that boulder to the right. It has 2 shadows." Ethan moved the binoculars. I saw his face tense. "Holy hell. You're right. 2 shadows. One is sharp, black, from the moon. The second? Fainter, slightly offset, like from another light source. But there is no second source." I took the binoculars back. Indeed, the large snow-covered boulder cast 2 shadows. One expected, sharp, created by the bright moonlight. The second, more blurred, ghostly, lay beside it, almost parallel to the first. As if there were two moons in the sky, shining from slightly different angles, but there was only one moon. What could it be? I whispered. An atmospheric phenomenon? A halo? Doesn't look like a halo. Ethan was already getting out his portable photospectrometer, a device that analyzes the spectral composition of light. Halos are usually around the light source. This is a shadow. A double shadow from one object with one light source. That's physically impossible. He aimed the device first at the spruce with one shadow, then at the boulder with two. Graphs flickered on the small screen. Okay, spectrum of reflected light from the spruce standard for moonlight reflected off snow and needles, Ethan muttered, studying the numbers. Now the boulder. Whoa. What is it? Lena asked, leaning forward. Anomaly. Ethan's eyes shone with scientific excitement mixed with anxiety. In the spectrum of reflected light from the boulder, especially in the area of the second ghostly shadow, there's a peak. In the ultraviolet range. A strong peak. As if the boulder itself or the snow around it is glowing in the UV spectrum, but faintly, so the eye can't see it. But this glow creates its own second shadow. Glowing in ultraviolet? I tried to picture it. Bioluminescence? Possibly. Ethan nodded. Some organisms, fungi, bacteria, deep-sea creatures can glow, but usually in the visible spectrum, UV glow, that's extremely rare, and for it to be intense enough to cast a shadow. Could it be related to it? Lena asked. The creature. Does it affect light somehow, or glow itself? Just then, one of the thermal cameras beeped, signaling movement. Ethan spun towards the tablet displaying the camera feeds. Movement detected. Edge of the forest, about half a kilometer from us. On the black and white thermal image, a bright heat signature was visible. Something large, moving on 4 legs, was emerging from the forest into the open. Moose? Caribou? I squinted at the blurry figure. Moving too fast for a moose, Ethan said. And, look. The creature on the screen stopped and began to change. It rose onto its hind legs. The silhouette elongated, becoming more humanoid, but still grotesque, wrong. And the heat signature, it grew brighter, more intense, especially around the head and chest. It's transforming? I whispered, feeling my blood run cold. And then I saw it through the night vision binoculars. The creature stood on the snow under the bright moonlight, tall, hunched, with long limbs and antlers. The same asymmetrical dark antlers from Jake's video. It slowly turned its head, surveying the area. And it cast 2 shadows. One, black, sharp, from the moon. And the second, ghostly, slightly offset, trembling. Bioluminescence. Ethan breathed, eyes glued to the spectrometer now aimed directly at the creature. Off the charts. In the UV range, it's glowing like a neon sign, especially the antlers and upper body. That glow creates the second shadow, I realized. It's acting as a second light source, invisible to us. The creature made a sound, the low, vibrating hum we'd heard on the radio. It rolled across the frozen inlet, seeming to make the air itself tremble. And then, it sang. The multi-voiced inhuman singing I'd heard on the GoPro recording. Drawn-out dissonant notes in an unknown language. It wasn't loud, but it penetrated clothing, bones, the brain. It induced nausea, dizziness, and a strange, irrational urge to walk towards the sound, to get closer. Kooshdakhaa, Lena whispered, covering her ears. Her face contorted. Stay strong, Ethan shouted, trying to be heard over the singing. "It's an acoustic effect. Infrasound, maybe. Don't give in." But the sound was powerful. I felt my will weakening, my legs wanting to step forward, towards the singing monster glowing with invisible light under the icy moon. Double shadows, ultraviolet glow, hypnotic singing, molecular transmutation. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of such primal alien horror that my mind refused to accept it. The creature took a step towards us. It knew we were there. It was calling us. The singing stopped as abruptly as it began. The horned creature froze for a moment, then darted back into the forest with startling speed, dissolving into the spruce shadows. The double shadow vanished with it. We were left alone on the hill, stunned by the silence and the horror we'd witnessed. My legs were shaking, my heart pounding somewhere in my throat. What was that?" I managed to say when I could speak again. "It's gone." Lena slowly lowered her hands from her ears. She was paler than usual. It sensed us, or changed its mind. Or it was just a show of force. Ethan was still fiddling with his spectrometer, saving the data. It showed itself, let us know it's here, and that it's something else entirely. He looked up at us, his expression troubled. That glow, UV bioluminescence of that intensity. I've never read about anything like it, and it's clearly linked to its physiology, maybe even the transformation. We quickly packed our equipment and returned to the base at Bartlett Cove. No one spoke on the way back. What we had seen and heard was too shocking, too unreal. But the data recorded by Ethan's instruments was undeniable. Over the next few days, Ethan dedicated himself to analyzing the data collected that night and re-examining the fur sample found near Reed Inlet. He was obsessed with understanding the nature of the UV glow and its connection to the anomalous proteins in fur structure. Lena immersed herself in old Tlingit texts and oral histories, trying to find references to a creature with horns, a double shadow, or one that glowed in the dark. I tried to piece everything together from an investigator's perspective. We had a modus operandi, attacks during the full moon. We had a suspect description, a tall, horned creature capable of changing form, quadrupedal to bipedal, emitting a hypnotic sound, and possessing strange bioluminescence that created a double shadow effect. We had evidence: hybrid proteins in victim remains, anomalous fur. But we had no motive other than survival through absorption, and no understanding of how this creature physically existed and transformed. On the third day after the full moon, Ethan burst into our HQ, his eyes blazing. "Found it! I found something!" He spread an enlarged image of a fur fiber under an electron microscope on the table. I ran an elemental analysis of this fur against all databases. Besides the expected carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, there are microscopic inclusions of copper. Not uncommon. Copper is an important trace element. But the form, they're crystals. Very specific crystals. He brought up another image on the screen, a crystal lattice. This is antlerite, a rare mineral, a secondary copper sulfate. It forms from the oxidation of copper ores, usually in arid conditions or in glacial environments where ore contacts oxygen and water. Antlerite, I repeated. What does that have to do with our creature? Everything. Ethan jabbed a finger at the screen. This mineral isn't just found lying around in significant quantities in soil or water. It forms directly on or near copper veins. If this mineral is integrated into the creature's fur structure, it means it either lives near a copper deposit or somehow utilizes copper in its biochemistry. Copper. Lena frowned. There are old copper mines in this area, from the Russian times. Exactly. Ethan was already unfolding an old geological map of the area he'd found in the archive. I checked. About 15 kilometers, approx to 9 miles northeast of Reed Inlet, away from the main tourist routes, there's an abandoned copper mine. Bear Creek Mine, it was called. Operations stopped there in the early 20th century. The map shows the entrance is at the foot of a glacier. Looks like the Muir Glacier partially covered it over time. We all leaned over the map. A small mine symbol was marked in a wild, uninhabited area amidst glaciers and cliffs. An abandoned copper mine, flooded or covered by a glacier. I felt the puzzle pieces clicking into place again. It's a perfect lair, hidden, hard to reach. And if antlerite plays some role, maybe copper catalyzes this. Bioluminescence? Or the transformation, Ethan suggested. Some enzymes in living organisms use copper. Maybe this creature has a unique metabolism linked to the copper from this mine. Sokolov's journal, Lena remembered. He heard the singing and saw tracks near Muir Inlet. That's exactly the area where the mine is. Then our next target is the Bear Creek Mine, I decided. We need to check that place out. Collect samples of rock, water, ice. See if there are any signs of whatever's been there. That's park territory, but off the usual routes, Lena said. No official trail leads there. And it's dangerous. The glacier is unstable. Collapses are possible. We'll go prepared. I looked at Ethan and Lena. Climbing gear, ice axes, ropes, and weapons. We don't know what or who we'll find there. We should notify Chief Ranger Tom Ward, Ethan said. He's responsible for park safety. We can't just go into a dangerous zone without his knowledge. Yes, you're right, I agreed. Though something told me Ward wouldn't be pleased with our plans. He'd been skeptical from the start, blaming everything on bears and poachers, and clearly didn't want feds poking around his territory. Lena, contact Ward. Inform him we have a new lead and plan an expedition to the old mine. Lena nodded and went to the radio. I looked at the map. An abandoned mine under a glacier. A place where the earth yielded its copper to ice and water. A place that could be home to a creature from ancient legends and nightmarish scientific reports. What would we find there? Answers? Or our deaths? Tom Ward met the news of our planned expedition to the Bear Creek Mine with poorly concealed irritation. We gathered in his office at the ranger station, a small wood-paneled room smelling of coffee and gun oil. Ward, a sturdy man in his 50s with a weathered face and graying temples, sat behind a massive oak desk, arms crossed. His eyes, pale blue like the faded Alaskan sky, regarded us coolly, warily. Bear Creek Mine, he repeated after Lena outlined our plan. His voice was low, raspy. Why do you need to go there? That's a hazardous area. Muir Glacier is unstable, constant collapses and crevasses, and the mine itself has been abandoned for ages, probably flooded and caved in. Nothing for you there. We have reason to believe this location might be connected to the disappearances, Ranger, I replied evenly, trying not to react to his obvious negativity. We found traces of a rare mineral, antlerite, associated with copper deposits, on evidence from the last incident site. Antlerite? Ward snorted. You can find that stuff in a dozen places around the bay. Old tunnels or outcrops. Doesn't prove anything. Most likely your evidence is just dirt blown in by wind or water. It wasn't just dirt, Ethan interjected. Microcrystals of the mineral were integrated into the structure of a biological sample. That indicates prolonged or constant contact between the sample source and the deposit. Biological sample? Ward shook his head. You're still chasing this idea of an unknown creature? Agent North, I thought the FBI handled serious business. People go missing in Glacier Bay, that's a fact. But the reason is likely mundane. Bears, bad weather, accidents, or poachers. We recently found several illegal traps right around Muir Inlet. Maybe your missing tourists stumbled onto them, or the poachers themselves. Poachers don't leave three-toed hoof prints that turn into bare human footprints, I countered. And they don't make victims' bodies vanish without a trace, leaving only blood with chimeric proteins. Ward's frown deepened. Tracks can be faked, and your chimeric proteins. Dr. Gray, with all due respect to your science, sometimes exotic theories lead you down the wrong path. We're dealing with wilderness here, and possibly armed criminals. You're looking for monsters from fairy tales. Ranger Ward. Lena spoke quietly but firmly. She stood by the window, looking out at the inlet. You know these places better than we do. Bear Creek Mine. What do you know about it? Do people go there? Have you seen anything strange there? Ward hesitated. He shifted his gaze to Lena, and I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes for a moment, besides irritation. Respect. Or a warning. Nobody goes there, Sergeant Kah. It's a restricted zone. Dangerous. I haven't been there myself in maybe 10 years. Last time was checking old mining claims, but there was nothing valuable left. Just rotten timbers and icy water. The glaciers moved closer to the entrance since then. Might be completely sealed off by now. He looked back at me. I cannot authorize your expedition. It's too risky. My people won't go there, and I can't let you risk your lives in my territory. Ranger, we have a federal mandate for this investigation, I countered, raising my voice slightly. We're not asking for permission. We're notifying you of our actions. We are going to that mine, with or without your approval. And what will you do if the glacier collapses? Or if you fall into a crevasse? Ward rose from his desk. He stood a head taller than me, his presence in the small office becoming almost menacing. Who's going to rescue you? My rangers? Risking their lives because you're chasing ghosts? We are experienced professionals and understand the risks. I tried to remain calm. We have the necessary equipment and training. You likely don't have the training for the reality of Glacier Bay, Agent North. Ward retorted. I am officially forbidding you from going to the mine. If you violate my order, I'll be forced to report you to your superiors for overstepping authority and creating a hazardous situation. Silence fell. I looked into Ward's stubborn eyes and knew he wasn't bluffing. He was clearly holding something back. His arguments about the danger sounded reasonable, but his reaction was too defensive. He wasn't just worried about our safety. He actively didn't want us near that mine. Why? All right, Ranger, I stepped back. We hear you. We won't proceed to the mine without further consultation. It was a lie, but arguing with him now was pointless. We needed to buy time and find another way. Ward nodded, his expression softening slightly. That's a reasonable decision. Focus on the poacher angle. My men are sweeping the area. If we find anything, we'll let you know. We left his office. The icy wind from the inlet hit our faces. He's lying, Lena said quietly once we were out of earshot. I think so too, I agreed. He's hiding something, or covering for someone. Poachers? Ethan looked doubtful. Seemed like he was using that as an excuse. Possibly. I glanced towards the mountains where the old mine lay hidden behind glaciers. But why is he so desperate to keep us away? What's there that we're not supposed to see? The answer suggested itself, but it was too wild to voice aloud. What if Ward and his rangers knew about the creature? What if they were somehow involved with it? We're still going, I said firmly. But now we'll have to do it secretly, without Ward knowing. That's dangerous, Valerie, Ethan warned. And if Ward finds out... We don't have a choice, I cut him off. That mine is our only real lead. And if Ward is trying to stop us, it means we're on the right track. Lena nodded. I know back ways. We can approach the mine area unseen. But we have to be very careful. Ward and his men know this park like the back of their hands. A plan began to form. A clandestine expedition to an abandoned mine under a glacier. Defying a direct order from the local authority. Risky. Unprofessional. But my gut screamed that the truth was hidden there, in the darkness beneath layers of ice and rock. And for some reason, Tom Ward was guarding that truth. The plan for a secret expedition had to wait. The following night, something happened that shifted our priorities and added another sinister layer to this tangled story. The night was foggy and moonless. A thick white shroud descended on the inlet, obscuring the horizon and turning Bartlett Cove into an isolated island in a hostile world. We were in our HQ, discussing route details for the mine trip, when the sound reached us. Faint at first, barely audible over the wind and the creaking of the old building. Then louder, clearer, singing. The same multi-voiced, dissonant singing we'd heard on the full moon night at Reed Inlet. But this time it sounded closer. Much closer. It seemed to be coming from somewhere along the shore, out in the fog. Lena and I exchanged glances. Ethan froze, listening. Is that it? He whispered. Sounds like it. I went to the window, trying to see anything through the milky veil. But there's no moon. Wasn't it supposed to be active only during the full moon? The song. It's different. Lena was listening too, frowning. That one was beckoning, hypnotic. This one sounds more like a ritual, a lament. The singing was indeed different. It lacked that aggressive, will-paralyzing power. It was slow, mournful, yet just as inhuman and unsettling. Multiple voices wove a complex, repetitive pattern that evoked not fear, but rather a deep, primal sorrow and unease. Where's it coming from? I asked. That side of the cove. Lena pointed into the fog. Where the old trail leads towards the point. We need to check it out, I decided. Ethan, stay here, maintain radio contact. Lena and I will go take a look. Be careful, Valerie, Ethan said, checking his radio. We bundled up, grabbed flashlights, weapons. I tucked my pistol into my pocket. Lena took her service revolver and a long hunting knife sheathed at her belt. Stepping outside, we plunged into the dense, damp fog. Visibility was zero. The singing grew louder, hanging in the air, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. We moved along the narrow shore path, navigating by sound and Lena's memory. The fog swallowed our flashlight beams, creating a small, shifting bubble of visibility around us. Every rustle, every snap of a twig underfoot made us jump. The feeling of another presence was almost palpable. The singing led us towards a small point jutting into the inlet. As we got closer, we began to hear not just voices, but a rhythmic beat, like someone drumming or striking wood against wood. Lena signaled me to stop and turn off my flashlight. We froze behind the trunks of large spruce trees, peering into the misty haze ahead. About 50 yards away, a faint orange glow pierced the fog. A campfire. We moved forward cautiously, trying not to make noise. The singing and rhythmic beat became very loud, and then the fog parted for a moment, revealing a strange scene. In a small clearing right by the water, it wasn't a campfire burning, but several oil lamps placed in a circle. In the center stood a short wooden totem pole, crudely carved but with recognizable features. It depicted two intertwined creatures, one with an elongated body and flat head, an otter, the other with branched antlers, a deer or caribou. They were carved such that one seemed to grow out of the other, merging into a single entity. At the base of the totem lay fresh fir branches and something dark, like a clump of wet fur. Around the totem, moving in a slow, almost trance-like rhythm, stood people, 5 of them, all dressed in dark, nondescript clothing similar to ranger uniforms. But their faces were hidden by masks. Wooden masks, carved in a traditional Tlingit style, but depicting not the usual spirits or animals. They were grotesque, frightening. Some had long, fanged muzzles resembling an otter's. Others had branched antlers, similar to those we'd seen on the creature during the full moon. And they were singing. Their voices blended into the mournful, otherworldly choir that had led us here. They swayed to the rhythm of the song, slapping their thighs or clapping their hands, creating the rhythmic accompaniment. I recognized one of them. Even masked, and in the dim lamplight, I knew the massive build and characteristic movements of Tom Ward, the park's chief ranger. The other 4 were likely his subordinates, rangers, in Tlingit-style masks, singing a ritual lament around a totem depicting a hybrid otter deer. My brain refused to accept it. What was this? Some local custom? A strange team-building exercise? Or something far more sinister? This isn't a traditional Tlingit ritual, Lena whispered beside me. Her voice trembled. The masks, they're similar, but wrong. And the song, it sounds like a morning chant. But the words, I don't understand all of them, but some, they're ancient, very ancient, and dark. The rangers continued their monotonous dance and chant, unaware of us. They were completely absorbed in the ritual. One of them, wearing a horned mask, approached the totem and placed another dark clump of fur at its base. My breath caught. It was the same gray-brown coarse fur we'd found where Jake and Amy disappeared. The creature's fur. So Ward didn't just know about the creature. He and his men worshipped it, performed rituals in its honor, tried to appease it, or something else. The questions multiplied, the answers becoming increasingly terrifying. Ward wasn't keeping us from the mine because he feared for our safety or wanted to hide poachers. He was guarding something else. A secret. His connection to whatever dwelled in the park's depths. The fog thickened again, hiding the strange scene. The singing continued, drifting over the dark waters of the inlet. We need to go, Lena whispered, grabbing my sleeve. Before they spot us. We carefully retreated, melting back into the fog. The walk back to the base felt like an eternity. Every shadow seemed a threat, every sound the steps of a pursuer. Back at HQ, we told Ethan what we'd seen. He was stunned. Rangers? Performing a ritual? With masks and fur? He couldn't believe it. So, they don't just know, they're involved? Looks like it. I sat at the table trying to organize my thoughts. Ward isn't just an obstacle. He's part of the problem, maybe the key part. But what kind of ritual? Lena looked at her hands. A lament for the dead, or something else. The totem, the deer and otter woven together. Merging, the word surfaced again. Merging proteins. Merging tracks. Merging spirits on the totem. And now rangers chanting an ancient song in ritual masks. What role did they play in this nightmare? Were they guardians of an ancient cult? Or something more? The answer likely awaited us where Tom Ward so desperately didn't want us to go. At the abandoned copper mine beneath the glacier. And now we had to get there as soon as possible. Before Ward and his men realized we'd discovered their secret. The very next night, under cover of darkness and another snowfall, we set out for the Bear Creek mine. We told Ward we were planning to patrol a different part of the bay to divert suspicion. Lena led us along barely visible game trails, bypassing main routes and ranger posts. The journey was arduous: deep snow, steep climbs, icy wind. We walked for hours, using only flashlights with red filters to avoid attracting attention. By dawn, we reached the foot of the Muir Glacier, at the spot marked on the old map as the mine location. The landscape was wild and harsh. A massive wall of bluish-white ice loomed over a narrow valley littered with rock debris and moraine. The air was filled with the quiet creaks and groans of the moving glacier. There was no visible mine entrance. It seemed Ward was right. The glacier had indeed blocked it. But Lena pointed to a small fissure at the very base of the ice wall, partially hidden by snowdrifts. "There," she said. "Old hunters used to say there's a passage under the ice here, a cave." The passage was narrow and low. We had to crawl on hands and knees through an ice tunnel, lighting the way with headlamps. It was even colder inside than out, and utterly silent except for our breathing and dripping water somewhere nearby. The tunnel walls were clear, transparent ice, embedding frozen stones and air bubbles. After a few dozen yards, the tunnel widened, opening into a spacious ice cavern. It was an incredible sight. The cavern ceiling vanished into darkness above, supported by massive ice columns resembling frozen waterfalls. The walls shimmered with blue and green light from our headlamps. In the center of the cavern was a small, unfrozen pool of dark, still water. "This is under the glacier," Ethan whispered, looking around with a mixture of awe and anxiety. "Yes," Lena nodded. "The glacier moves above us. This place has existed for thousands of years." But it wasn't the cavern's natural beauty that caught our attention. Near the far wall where the ice met the rock face was something man-made. We moved closer. It was a smooth stone slab, roughly 3 by 5 feet, frozen into the ice at the base of the cliff. Symbols and images were carved into its surface, not Tlingit script, something older, more archaic. The drawings depicted people in skins hunting deer, people by water catching fish or otters. And again, the recurring motif: a figure with a human body and a horned head, sometimes with webbed feet like an otter's. "What is this?" I asked, running a gloved finger over the cold symbols. Lena knelt, carefully studying the slab. "It looks like a record, a history, very old." She began slowly reading the images and symbols, sometimes pausing, searching for words. "It speaks of a people who lived on this land before other tribes arrived. Hunters. They made a pact with the spirits of the place, with the spirit of the deer, master of the forest, and the spirit of the river, or otter, master of the water." "A pact," Ethan repeated. "What kind of pact?" "A pact to protect the land," Lena continued, her voice almost hypnotic in the icy silence. "The spirits granted them power, the ability to take on part of their essence, to become faster, stronger, to feel the forest and water as their own bodies. But there was a price, a condition." She pointed to a series of symbols in the center of the slab. "Wear their skin, but shed no blood of your own. That's the main condition. To maintain the pact, the hunters had to perform a ritual of merging." "Merging?" I looked at Ethan. "Like those hybrid proteins?" Lena nodded, her gaze fixed on the slab. "The ritual itself is described here. Performed during the full moon, participants ingest special salts found in the heart of the mountain, possibly in that copper mine, and then, under the moonlight, union occurs. The spirit of the beast enters the human, not killing them, but merging with them. The human gains the beast's power it senses but retains their mind. Partially. So they're not shapeshifters in the classic sense? Ethan was astonished. It's symbiosis? Ritual symbiosis? Wear their skin, Lena repeated. It doesn't mean kill the animal and wear its hide. It means accept its essence into yourself. Become it without ceasing to be yourself. But there's a warning. She pointed to the lower part of the slab, where the symbols were more chaotic, disturbing. A warning that if the taboo is broken, if the blood of your own, meaning other humans, is shed while wearing the skin, the merging becomes irreversible. The beast spirit consumes the human mind, transforms the host into something else, eternally hungry, craving not food but life force itself. The missing people, I realized, their blood was shed by those wearing the skin. The ritual was broken. And now, they aren't just symbiotes. They've become monsters. And Ward and his rangers, are they descendants of those ancient hunters? Ethan guessed. Are they still performing the ritual? But why? And why did they start killing? Perhaps the ritual was meant to protect the land, Lena said. Maybe they believe modern people, tourists, corporations are shedding the blood of the land, disturbing its peace, and the rangers as guardians tried to protect it. But crossed the line, broke the ancient taboo. I looked at the image of the horned creature on the slab. It was carved with respect, almost reverence. An ancient protector turned nightmare because of a broken pact. So their transformation isn't a curse, but the result of a ritual, amplified by minerals from the mine. Ethan thoughtfully rubbed his chin. And the moonlight? Ultraviolet. Maybe UV light activates these salts or minerals, triggering the transformation. And the bioluminescence is a side effect? Copper ore. Antlerite, moonlight, merging ritual. I tried to connect it all. It's insane, but it fits. The tracks, the hybrid proteins, the double shadows, Ward's behavior. Suddenly, we heard a sound, scraping. From the direction of the tunnel we'd used to enter. We froze, switching off our lights. In the darkness of the ice cave, the sound grew louder. Someone was walking down the ice corridor. Heavy footsteps. Breathing. Had Ward found out we were here, or was it something else? We pressed against the rock wall near the slab, weapons ready. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they'd hear it outside. A dark silhouette appeared at the tunnel entrance. It was alone, tall, massive. He switched on a flashlight. The beam hit the ice. It was Tom Ward, alone, unmasked. But the look on his face was scarier than any mask. His eyes burned with a cold fire. He slowly swept the cavern with the beam, and the light stopped on us. I knew you'd stick your noses in here, Agent North. His voice echoed deep and menacing in the icy silence. You shouldn't have seen this. No one should. He raised his hand. It wasn't holding the flashlight. It held a heavy ice axe. We stood frozen under Ward's icy gaze and the beam of his flashlight. The ice axe in his hand looked deadly in the confined space of the cave. There was nowhere to run. He blocked the only exit. Ward! Drop the axe, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I was coiled tight inside. My pistol was aimed at his chest. We know. We saw the slab. We know about the ritual. No? Ward chuckled, a harsh, joyless sound. You don't know anything. You outsiders with your rules and laws. You come here, trample our land, scare the animals, defile the water. You are the ones shedding blood, the blood of this land. The people you or it killed were tourists, Ward. They weren't a threat, Ethan shouted. They're a symptom of the disease. Ward snarled, taking a step forward. The ice axe swung menacingly. "The disease that's killing this world. We are the guardians. We were supposed to protect the balance, wear the skin, to feel the land's pain. But we made a mistake." His voice cracked on the last word. "A mistake? By killing innocents? Breaking your own taboo?" Lena asked quietly. Her hand rested on the handle of her knife. "It was weakness." Ward shook his head, his gaze clouding for a moment. "Anger. It blinded us. We gave in to the call of blood when we shouldn't have. And now the beast inside is stronger than the man. It demands more." "The beast? Or is it just you, Ward? You and your men?" I kept my pistol trained on him. Ward looked at me, a strange mix of fury and desperation in his eyes. "The full moon is soon. Tonight. You'll see for yourselves. But you're not leaving here. The secret must be kept." He lunged forward abruptly. I fired, not to kill, into the ice at his feet. The deafening roar echoed through the cave, sending ice shards flying. Ward staggered back but wasn't deterred. He didn't charge us but darted towards a narrow crevice in the rock face near the slab. The place Lena suggested was the heart of the mountain, the mine. "After him!" I yelled. We plunged after him. The crevice led into a dark, narrow passage in the rock, clearly an old drift of the abandoned mine. The walls were damp, water dripped from the ceiling. Mud and ice slush squelched underfoot. The air was stale, smelling of dampness and copper, a sharp metallic tang. We heard Ward's heavy breathing and footsteps ahead. He knew these tunnels. We moved slowly, stumbling in the dark, lighting the way with wavering flashlight beams. The drift twisted, branched. We could easily get lost, but Ward seemed to be heading for a specific goal. After a few minutes, we heard his voice ahead, but he wasn't talking to us. He was yelling something in Tlingit. Other voices answered him. We cautiously peered around a bend. The drift opened into a larger mine chamber. It was an old stope, the walls glistening with greenish and bluish veins of copper ore. In the center stood Ward and 3 other men, his rangers, the same ones we'd seen masked by the totem. They looked agitated, frightened. "They're here! They know everything!" Ward shouted, pointing at us. The rangers turned. Fear and resolve were on their faces. They weren't carrying firearms, but each had an ice axe or a heavy pickaxe. "You shouldn't have come here," said one of them, a young man with a raven tattoo on his neck. "Now there's no way out, not for you, not for us." And then we heard the howl, low, drawn out, coming from somewhere above, not the howl of a wolf or dog, something much deeper and more disturbing. "The moon," whispered one of the rangers, looking up where a vertical fissure in the mine ceiling revealed a faint, ghostly light. "It's rising." Ward looked at his men. "The time has come. The pact must be renewed, or we all perish." Then the most terrifying part began. The rangers, including Ward, pulled small leather pouches from their belts. They poured a grayish-green powder, clearly the salts from the heart of the mountain, onto their palms and swallowed it. And then they put on helmets. Not masks like at the totem, but actual helmets. Made from crudely welded pieces of copper and real deer antlers, large branching antlers. The helmets covered their heads and upper faces, leaving only the lower jaw visible. As soon as the helmets were on their heads, a bright beam of moonlight struck through the fissure in the ceiling. It fell directly onto the rangers, and their bodies began to change. It wasn't like transformations in movies. It was agonizing, terrifying, real. We heard the cracking of bones, the tearing of muscles. Their limbs elongated, bending at unnatural angles. Their backs hunched. The skin on exposed areas, hands, necks, rippled, and then slime began to ooze from their pores. a pale blue phosphorescent slime that immediately started to thicken, turning into something resembling gray-brown fur. Ethan aimed his portable UV flashlight at them. The sight became even more horrific. The Rangers' helmets and upper bodies erupted in a bright, unearthly blue glow. Bioluminescence. It pulsed in time with their labored, rasping breaths. The light seemed to come not just from the fur, but from within, under the skin. Their faces, the parts visible beneath the helmets, distorted. Jaws elongated, teeth sharpened. But their eyes, something human still remained in their eyes. Wild fear, pain, and hunger. An inhuman, all-consuming hunger. These weren't costumes. This was a real biological transformation, triggered by a mixture of minerals, moonlight, and some ancient, alien power contained in this place. 4 creatures stood before us. Tall, hunched, covered in glowing fur, with copper helmets crowned by real antlers. They emitted a low, growling sound, like the hum we'd heard before. The keepers had become the monsters. Symbiosis had turned into a nightmare, and they were looking at us with hungry eyes. The transformation was complete. The 4 creatures, former Rangers, now something else entirely, straightened as much as their distorted bodies allowed. The copper helmets with antlers gleamed dully in the light of our flashlights, and their own eerie UV glow. Their movements became sharp, jerky, yet terrifyingly fast and silent. They moved on bent legs, long arms with clawed fingers nearly touching the ground.
"Back!" I yelled, retreating towards the narrow passage we'd entered through. "Lena! Ethan, let's go!"
But the creatures were faster. 2 darted towards the exit, cutting off our escape route. The other 2, including the one that had been Ward, moved directly towards us. The hunt began. They moved strangely, non-linearly. It seemed like they flickered. One moment a creature was 10 feet away, the next it was right at my shoulder, though I hadn't seen it move. It was that double shadow effect, but now manifesting not in shadows, but in our perception of space itself. Their bioluminescent glow and perhaps some field they generated distorted our vision, created optical illusions. We saw them in 2 places at once, unsure where the real threat lay. "They're warping space," Ethan yelled, dodging a clawed swipe. "Don't trust your eyes." One of the creatures lunged at Lena. She met it not with a shot, but with her knife. The long blade sank into the creature's shoulder, where the fur was thinner. It howled, a sound like scraping metal, and staggered back, dark, thick fluid, faintly glowing under UV light pouring from the wound. The blood. "It's different," Ethan noted, even in the heat of the fight. I fired at the creature that had been Ward. The bullet hit its chest, near the copper helmet. A dull thud, like hitting metal. The creature staggered but didn't fall. The helmet had protected it. Or was it more than the helmet? Had their bodies become incredibly durable? "Aim for the limbs! Unprotected areas!" I shouted. We retreated deeper into the mine, firing as we went. The creatures used no weapons, only their claws, teeth, and incredible speed and strength. They tried to separate us, surround us. In a side drift, Ethan noticed something on the floor. A puddle of the same glowing slime that coated the creatures' bodies and dripped from their fur. Despite the danger, his scientific instinct took over. "I need a sample," he yelled, and seizing a moment when the creatures were focused on Lena and me, he dashed to the puddle and quickly scooped some slime into a sterile vial from his kit. At that moment, one of the creatures leaped at him from behind. I managed to fire, hitting the thing in the leg. It howled and collapsed, writhing on the floor. But the second creature, the Ward creature, caught Ethan. A clawed hand struck the arm holding the vial. "Ah!" Ethan cried out, falling. The vial thankfully didn't break, but his arm was torn open, blood pouring onto the dirty mine floor. Lena rushed to Ethan, dragging him around a bend in the drift while I covered them, firing to drive back the ward creature. It didn't pursue the injured man, focusing again on me. "Valerie, this way!" Lena called. I fell back around the bend. Lena was already tying Ethan's arm with a strip of cloth torn from her shirt. Ethan was pale but conscious. "The vial. Safe?" he asked through gritted teeth. Yeah, it's safe." Lena tightened the knot. "Hang in there, Doc." The creatures were approaching again. We could hear their footsteps and growls. We were trapped in a dead end. The drift ended in a rockfall ahead. "Is this the end?" Lena whispered, raising her revolver. My mind raced. What did we know? Copper, moonlight, UV glow, bioluminescence. Ethan mentioned silver and Kooshdakhaa legends. But this wasn't Kooshdakhaa. Wait, silver. In my pack? Signal flares. I had one silver signal flare standard survival kit item for scaring bears. Silver. "Ethan, quick! This slime. What could it be?" I asked, digging through my pack. "Looks like colonies of extremophile algae or bacteria." Ethan winced in pain, but the scientist's brain was working. "The kind that live in ice, in darkness. Maybe they form a symbiosis with the host through those copper salts. The moon's UV activates them, makes them glow, and maybe they're the ones building those hybrid proteins, invading the blood, rebuilding the host's tissues. Algae? Activated by UV?" I found the flare. The silver casing felt cold. What if we block their glow? Deprive them of energy? Maybe it would weaken them? Ethan looked at the flare. "Silver. Some silver compounds are toxic to microorganisms and can block enzymatic processes. It might work." The creatures were at the entrance to our dead-end drift. Their glowing silhouettes filled the passage. "Lena, get down!" I yelled. I pulled the pin and squeezed the trigger of the flare gun. The silver flare hissed out and struck the wall right in front of the advancing creatures. The flash was blinding, not red or green, but bright silver, almost white. It flooded the narrow drift with harsh, cold light, and the creatures screamed, not in pain from a burn, but differently. Their bioluminescent glow began to fade, pulse like a dying light bulb. They staggered, covering their helmets with their hands, as if the light caused physical pain. Their movements became slow, clumsy. "It's working!" Ethan cried. "Silver ions. They're blocking the glow, depriving them of energy." The silver flare died, but the effect lingered. The creatures looked disoriented, weak. Their own UV glow was almost gone. "Our chance, let's move! Back to the ice cave," I ordered. We bolted past the weakened creatures. They tried to grab us, but their movements were sluggish. Ward swung a clawed hand at me, but I dodged and hit his copper helmet with my pistol butt. He stumbled back. We ran out of the drift into the main mine chamber and dashed towards the passage leading back to the ice cave. Behind us, we heard furious but powerless growls. The silver hadn't killed them, but it gave us a chance to get out of this icy hell alive. We burst out of the suffocating darkness of the mine back into the shimmering blue of the ice cave. The air here was cleaner, colder, but there was no time to rest. The growling from the mine grew louder. The silver flare's effect was apparently temporary, and the creatures were recovering. "To the exit, quickly," I commanded, supporting the injured Ethan. Lena ran ahead, lighting the way. We crawled through the narrow ice tunnel leading outside. Every foot was a struggle. Ethan groaned in pain. His arm was bleeding heavily despite the bandage. Lena practically dragged him. I brought up the rear, constantly looking back. When we emerged, the pre-dawn twilight greeted us. The snow had stopped, but the sky was still overcast. Faint gray light barely penetrated the clouds. The Muir Glacier loomed over us, a silent, menacing mass. "Where now?" Ethan asked, breathing heavily. "To the water," Lena replied, pointing towards Muir Inlet visible in the distance. "We left an inflatable boat there just in case. If we can reach it, we can escape by water." The path to the inlet lay across an ice field, a frozen part of the fjord covered in snow and riddled with crevasses. It was dangerous, but faster than following the shore and risking another encounter with the creatures in the forest. We started across the ice. Lena went first, testing the ice's strength with an ice axe. I supported Ethan. His condition was deteriorating. He was losing strength from blood loss. And then we heard them, howling. Not from the cave, but from the shore. They had circled around through the woods and were now emerging onto the ice, blocking our path to open water. All four of them. Their bioluminescent glow was returning, though not as bright as under the full moon. The dawn light, diffused by clouds, apparently didn't give them full power, but they were still dangerous. They began approaching us across the ice, moving with their strange, flickering gait. And they were cutting the ice. With their claws, they gouged deep furrows in the surface, trying to cut off our path to the boat or herd us onto thin ice. The screech of claws on ice echoed in the morning stillness, grating on our nerves.
"Faster!" Lena yelled, pulling Ethan along.
The boat was close now, a small, dark shape at the edge of the ice where open water began. But the creatures were faster. They formed a semicircle around us, slowly tightening it.
"We're out of ammo!"
Lena shouted, tossing aside her empty revolver. I had only 2 rounds left in my pistol. We were trapped. On the ice, beneath the looming glacier, surrounded by glowing monsters. Ethan suddenly looked up, not at the creatures, but at the sky. Look. In the breaks in the clouds to the east, a glow appeared. Not moonlight. Bright greenish pink. The aurora borealis. It flared brighter, shimmering, dancing above the horizon. Dawn was breaking the night. And as the aurora intensified, the creature's bioluminescence began to fade, rapidly, as if someone flipped a switch. Their own UV glow, seemingly activated not only by the moon, but by any sufficiently intense ultraviolet light, and the aurora is rich in UV, was now being suppressed by the visible light of dawn. The creatures stopped. They looked confused, almost blind. Their movements became even more clumsy, slow. They growled, but their voices lacked the previous menace, sounding more like fear and pain. "Dawn," I breathed. "It weakens them." "Now, run for the boat," Lena ordered. We dashed towards the edge of the ice. The creatures tried to stop us, but without their speed and strength, they were almost helpless. Ward took a step towards us, but slipped on the ice and fell awkwardly. The others just stood there, staring at the brightening dawn and the aurora, as if the light hurt them. We reached the boat. It was a small, inflatable dinghy with a tiny motor. Lena quickly pushed it into the water. I helped Ethan climb in. He collapsed onto the floor, nearly unconscious. Lena jumped in after him and yanked the starter cord. The motor coughed once, twice, and caught. With a quiet sputter, the boat began to move away from the ice edge. I looked back. 4 dark figures stood on the ice, watching us helplessly. Their helmets and antlers were silhouetted sharply against the lightening sky and the aurora. The guardians turned monsters, defeated by the light of day. "Will they stay there?" I asked Lena. "I don't know." She watched the receding figures with a heavy expression. "Maybe they'll return to the mine until the next night. Maybe the light will kill them. They're not human anymore, Valerie." The boat picked up speed, carrying us away from Muir Glacier, from the ice cave, from the Bear Creek mine. We moved out onto the dark water of the inlet, disappearing into the morning fog that was beginning to thicken again over the water. Ethan lay on the boat floor, his breathing shallow. I checked his pulse. He was alive but needed urgent medical attention. Clutched in his hand was still the vial of glowing slime, the key to unlocking the mystery of Glacier Bay. We had survived. We were heading home. But what had we left behind? And was this nightmare truly over? I looked at my hands. A smear of dark, viscous blood from the creature that had been Ward stained my glove. Blood containing chimeric proteins. Had a drop touched my skin? Had I taken a piece of this icy horror with me? The fog closed in behind the stern, obscuring the shore. We were alone amidst the cold water and the unknown. From the official report of FBI Special Agent Valerie North, case file hash AK793GLB. During the investigation into the series of disappearances within Glacier Bay National Park, it has been determined that the primary cause of the incidents is exposure to an aggressive and previously unknown biological agent. The agent, tentatively classified as an extremophile microorganism, possibly symbiotic algae or bacteria, was detected in samples collected at the incident site and in the vicinity of the abandoned Bear Creek mine near Muir Glacier. This microorganism, activated by UV radiation, including moonlight and aurora borealis, is capable of penetrating the human body and inducing rapid and irreversible physiological and psychopathological changes, leading to extreme aggression, loss of human characteristics, and ultimately, the death of both the host and its victims. The precise mechanism of action and transformation requires further study. Chief Ranger Thomas Ward and 3 subordinates, list attached, went missing during survey operations in the mine area. It is presumed they became victims of the aforementioned biological agent. Search efforts are ongoing, but chances of finding them alive are considered minimal. Due to the discovery of a hazardous and unstudied biological factor posing a threat to human life and health, it is strongly recommended: 1. Declare the area surrounding Muir Glacier and the abandoned Bear Creek mine a strict quarantine zone. 2. Prohibit access to the designated zone for all civilian and unauthorized personnel. 3. Organize further study of the biological agent by specialized units, preferably USAMRIID or CDC, under Maximum Biological Safety Protocols, BSL-4. 4. Classify all materials pertaining to case file hash AK793GLB to prevent panic and unpredictable consequences. Attachment: vial containing biomaterial sample, slime preliminarily identified as extremophile microorganism colony, collected by Dr. Ethan Gray, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service near Bear Creek Mine. Requires immediate transport to a BSL-4 laboratory. Signed, Special Agent Valerie North. My report landed on my superior's desks and vanished. The case was immediately classified top secret highest level. No official statements, no news about dangerous algae. The disappearances in Glacier Bay were attributed to accidents and bear attacks. The park remained open to tourists, although the Muir Inlet area was indeed closed under the pretext of glacial instability and geological surveys. Ethan Gray was urgently evacuated to a military hospital in Anchorage, then transferred somewhere to the lower 48. His wound healed poorly with complications. Official story: sepsis following an animal attack. I tried to contact him, but all my inquiries were blocked. His ultimate fate is unknown to me, as is the fate of the sample vial. I hope he didn't take the skin of ice with him. Kooshdakhaa was quietly transferred to duty in another part of Alaska, far from Glacier Bay. We exchanged a couple of brief coded messages. She wrote that the Hoona elders performed a cleansing ceremony near Muir Inlet, trying to appease the spirits of the land, disturbed by us and the broken ancient pact. Whether it helped is unknown. I returned to Washington, D.C. I was promoted. For successful completion of a complex case under extreme conditions. There's no glowing slime on my hands, but the cold of Glacier Bay seems to have settled permanently in my soul. I know the truth. The truth about the horned otter, about the symbiosis of man and ancient ice, about guardians who became monsters. And that truth is my own personal curse. Sometimes I look at the nighttime satellite imagery of Alaska available in the Bureau's classified database. I find Glacier Bay, Muir Glacier. There, where the abandoned mine should be complete darkness, sometimes, especially on nights near the full moon, the satellite detects a faint, barely perceptible blue glow. It's still there, waiting for the next full moon, waiting for new blood, or waiting for someone else to come and wear its skin.